Y'all, not even a full day after teasing the new WALLARU spell animation, Wizard101 literally told us what all the spells do. Today, I'm gonna be reviewing all of the new WALLARU spells, talking about how they're gonna affect the game. These are looking to be powerful spells, y'all, so let's get right into it. So the one you see on your screen right now is the Storm spell, but keep in mind that all of these are AoEs. However, what I will say is that these are AoEs unlike anything we've seen in the game before. They're way more powerful than the average AoE for your school at any other level. And that's because of the school pip that's on them. If you guys don't know, basically they have like a way to standardize how much damage a spell does. And the second you add a school pip, that spell gets to do way more damage or have a much better utility than it would without the school pip. Now, each school pip is just worth 2 pips, so all of these AoEs are 5 pip AoEs, meaning with a pip deck and a wand like everyone else at a high level, you can do these AoEs right away first round. Now, that's a huge deal, so I wanted to go school by school to compare it to whatever AoEs available to that school. We're starting off with Storm. I would say the best 5 pip AoE that you actually have right now is unfortunately just Tempest. At 4 pips, you do have Squall Wyvern. This is not something you can enchant, and you have to craft the whole amulet to get it. But for 4 pips, you can do about 700 damage, and by enchanting a Tempest at 5 pips, you can only do about 700 damage with this too. But with this new AoE, you can literally do 600 plus 300, which is 900 damage upfront as an AoE right away. This is such a big power increase for Storm. Like, I don't think people are like even, I don't know, I haven't seen people freaking out over this. But this is probably the best AoE that Storm has gotten since like literally Stormlord maybe. So like, it's kind of nuts. The jewel on it that's coming with WALLARU is also probably going to increase Storm's damage quite a bit. So a lot of things that we currently farm right now that you might do in 2 or 3 turns, who knows? They might become 1-turn strats. So farming things like spellaments, like gear, it might be a lot easier now than it was before, unless the boss happens to have some kind of weird gimmick that prevents you from running your main school damage, your main school hit. Fire's AoE, Phantasmania, I think. Phantasmania, I don't know how to, you know what? I'm not going to pronounce it. This one is a pretty big drop off from Storm. And obviously that's because Storm's damage per pip has always been way higher. But for 3 fire pips and 1 life school pip, you can basically do way more damage as an AoE than anything that fire has available to it right now. If you spellman it all the way, it could do 500 damage with an enchant. You're looking at 800 damage. That is pretty similar, I would say, to Storm's 925 max damage on their AoE. But to me, it's very interesting. Basically, if y'all don't know, just like how school pips make spells more powerful, if something is a dot, it also gets a bonus. That's basically because you can actually reduce the damage of the dot as it's on you, so you need to make it more powerful to make up for that very inbuilt weakness. But even with that inbuilt weakness, right, Scald, which gets that dot bonus, it does 525 damage over 3 rounds, and it is the most, you know, like, you know, similar AoE. What's crazy is that this new AoE for fire does about as much as Scald, but it does it all up front. No dots, you don't have to wait for all that animation time. Now, there is a strat with this spell, Incendiate, on the Professor's fire hat that basically does still make Scald Fire's best bet. That's because what this spell does, it destroys the overtime on everybody, and it also makes it do 200% damage. So if you're questing alone, this new spell is clearly better, but if you have a friend that can actually, you know, have the resources to detonate your OT, then even now for PvE, Scald is still your best turn 1 AoE that you want to do for all your farming purposes. It's weird, but Fire still has the like, Scald is still the best bet for any strategy if you want to do an AoE first round and do a ton of damage. If the boss you happen to be going against does something that prevents you from incendiating or maybe like, I don't know, dotting, right, doing a damage over time, then this new spell is really good. Now let's talk about Myth. This is really weird, but I think Myth is the only school that got an AoE. If this is like what is going to be in Test Realm, I think they got the one AoE that they won't use. There's a couple of reasons for this. This is the spell. As you can see, it does 450 damage when you max cure it. And I don't know, for a spell that gets a bonus for having a school pip on it, this feels so weak. Obviously, it's a lot better than Humongo Frog, right? If you're first rounding it, Humongo Frog is not as good. It's also slightly better than Basilisk from your Dragoon Amulet. So obviously, yes, it is some sort of upgrade. But the truth of the matter is, Orthrus with an epic enchant doing 1,000 damage 1 round later is always going to be better in my opinion. It's kind of sad that the 7 pip AoE just fully outclasses a level 170 spell basically, but there's a lot of reasons for this, right? The other 2 higher DPP schools than Myth actually lose value on their spells because of what their spells do, right? Stormlord loses value and does less than Orthrus, even though it's a storm spell, because of the stun. And Fire, even though it does way more damage than Orthrus, so much of it's on the overtime that it's not as good of an AoE in the traditional sense. So, for all intents and purposes, if you're just trying to do damage up front, Orthrus is the best AoE in the game, and it will continue to be the best AoE in the game. So I guess it's not that surprising that the school that needed a good AoE the least, ironically, because Myth has needed an AoE for most of its time, but since they changed Orthrus, it's had the best. I guess they benefited the least from this update. Kinda sad, I'll be honest. Out of all the schools, this is the one that kind of took an L here. The death spell, it's called Wabagong Frenzy, I think. Listen, I said I'd stop saying them, but I can't help myself. Now, death is very interesting because it actually does have an AoE that also does use a school pip and therefore does get a bonus, but you have to farm like crazy to max tier this. I max tiered my Ship of Fools simply for farming purposes. You can actually make a drain out of it, or you can make just a damage path out of it. They're both very, very good, but you might notice the maximum damage this can even do for 2 pips and a school pip is 400 damage, and if you know, get all your spellments and stuff, which shouldn't be that hard for this new spell, it does 425. So it's actually not a huge upgrade from Ship of Fools. The difference is, if you, let's say that you don't have a bunch of spell elements, then obviously you're not gonna have a Ship of Fools that can even mildly compete. It's basically a free Ship of Fools for 1 extra pip. If you're, you know, someone that actually happens to have max tier Ship of Fools, what you probably could do is pack a deck where you farm things or defeat mobs with both Ship of Fools and Wabagong Frenzy. It's kind of weird because I would argue that this is still a better AoE, which is kind of whack, I think, but I guess that's just how, I guess that's how death damage per pip works. Of all the schools to get a buff from these new AoEs, I would say the balance is probably, weirdly, they got one of the biggest buffs. Right now, your best bet for an AoE that you want to do right away is Sandstorm. It is extremely weak, 225 damage to 295. This new spell does nearly 500 damage as an AoE. It's extremely powerful. It's so powerful that the one AoE that I would argue that, you know, balance does have that's somewhat accessible, which is Power Nova, is now much worse. Instead of Power Novaing, what you should really think about doing is Sandstorming out of the new balance spell. It also looks cool. It's like a rainbow serpent. I love the animation. Honestly, I thought it was a storm spell, but I think it's a storm and death fusion spell with balance. I don't know what's going on with it. My theory as to why this spell is so goddamn powerful, and maybe I'm just fully waffling, but I think because it has 2 school pips added onto it, it technically makes it much higher damage per pip. Because as we said, the more if you have 1 school pip, the spell does more. If you have 2, it does even more. It's essentially almost like getting a 7 pip AoE for 5 pips, I would argue. It's almost like maybe a 6 pip AoE for 5 pips. Really, really good stuff for balance. Life's new AoE is called Zan's Bandit. That's the one in the thumbnail on the video that I put out. I feel like everyone's freaking out over this spell. But just like Death, Life is in a weird spot where their best AoE at low pips is a lore spell. So they already have, if you happen to have the spell, 1 spell that uses a school pip to do extra damage on a low pip AoE. Now, unfortunately, I haven't even max tiered this. I know, I'm slacking. But you no longer have to max tier this in order to do an insane amount of damage with an AoE first round on a life, because this new spell does well over ratatata. The spell, it does way more. If you max tier Zan's Bandit, it does 420 as an AoE. And once again, just like Ship of Fools, you don't have to farm like hundreds of gold keys worth of bosses to even get a good AoE now. You're basically being given free value for being a level 170 for both death and life. Really, really cool, like, progress being made on this, because I feel like there's been an AoE problem for both death and life for a long time. And I guess this is their way of solving it finally, at least if you're a max level. And finally, what could be one of the most underrated, you know, things that we've seen, like, added into the game, we have a new spell called Count Crocula, and it's an ice AoE. Now, ice has a crazy history with AoEs that I feel like nowadays people are fed up with how bad it is. Blizzard is an entire joke. I mean, for this to be your best turn 1 AoE still is nuts. First, it's so weak. Ice doesn't get that much damage. And what I think sucks a little bit more ass is that Frost Giant, which you would argue, right? Let's say you don't want a Blizzard, you would think, okay, you maybe use 7 pip AoE, you wait an extra turn to do damage. This is also very weak. It's very hard to quest as an ice or even contribute as an ice when your AoEs are this bad. The reason why Frost Giant is so bad for 7 pips is that stun removes a lot of value from it. So now we have an AoE with the school pip. So instead of an AoE that gets value removed from it, we now have an AoE that has value added onto it. It does 420 damage just like the life spell if you max tier it. And y'all, this is just a game changer for ice. I mean, instead of waiting a turn to Frost Giant, you could either blade into this and basically get a bladed Frost Giant, or you could literally just do it right away and probably do a lot more damage than you're used to doing. This might be the end of the Frost Giant controversy altogether. We finally have a low pip AoE that's actually good for ice. This has not happened in the many years that Wiz has been out. All in all, I know some people are probably disappointed because if they are like me and you do a lot of 1v1 PvP, it's probably not that much of an update for you spell-wise. And also, I'm sure people wanted spellments to be able to customize the spell in case you want to go the casual route or if you want to do something else. And we do have a comment on that. They are going to be adding spellments to this, just not now. I don't think they have rules around how to balance AoEs. It's just something that I think they're still working on. And a lot of this stuff is probably going to be related to the minion audit that they're doing still, which is why minions are still no PvP. PvP, advanced content, all of that is a huge work in progress, so I would consider these direct upgrades to all of your wizards if you happen to quest to the final level, but a work in progress regardless. That's the best way to look at it. I just want to get my honest opinion. Honestly, it's hard to have a negative opinion of this because I do farm a lot of stuff. I do have 7 wizards to quest. I can't wait to not take as much time by blizzarding on an ice, or like, I don't know, you know, it's gonna be that sandstorming out of bounds. If you guys want to see the animations for these and just my, you know, previous speculations, you can watch the previous video too. They look beautiful. I would love to hear y'all's opinions on the fact that these are AoEs, the fact that they have school pips, and the fact that they're, you know, direct upgrades to AoEs like we've never had. I look forward to reading all of y'all's comments. Drop a like if you enjoyed, leave a sub if you're new, and if somebody hasn't told you you're awesome today, they doing something wrong. Stay awesome. See y'all soon, and yeah.